So chances are you're watching this video because you want an internship. So in this video, I'm going to show you guys exactly how to do that in 2026. So the first thing before I jump straight to it, I want you guys to understand what it even means, right? I know for a university or for a student, internship is maybe like a small time period where you get some work experience, but there's something more deeper than that, right? So your goal as a student to go through an internship is to eventually get a full-time job in the same company where you're doing an internship, right? So imagine you're doing an internship at Google or Amazon, and you walk in and you basically do the most mundane and repetitive and boring tasks, with the hope by the end of the 6 to 9 week period, depending on how long your internship is, they will hopefully offer you a full-time job, right? So that's going to be a very specific goal for you as a student. Now, for the company, and this is even more important, I would say, the reason for an internship or the excuse for an internship is known as labor arbitrage. You have to understand that hiring interns is very cheap, right? In comparison to hiring a full-time experienced person, putting them on a contract, paying their EPF, paying their salary, the pension, benefits, etc., etc. An intern, or an internship for that matter, is much cheaper, right, in terms of the economy for the company. And so that's why they love hiring interns. And it is also for those reasons there's specific quotas for companies hiring interns, right? It has its pro and con, right? For the pro, you don't see too much labor exploitation for the company. But for the con, that means that there's a lot of competition for internship. And by a lot, I mean a lot. So the most sought after job, as an example, is a financial analyst, right? If you're studying accounting, if you are even in international business, if you want to become an audit or financer, financial analyst is one of the most highly competitive positions, especially specifically for an internship. And me and my business partner, we've been speaking to a lot of recruiters from Big Fours, and the competition is insane, right? Imagine you're applying for a summer internship at a Big Four. The amount of people that actually apply for that same position is crazy. You'll be expecting anywhere between 5 to 7,000 people for one particular role. And remember the topic about the quota. Out of the 5 to 7,000 people, you know how many people they accept? Maybe max 200 or even 100, depending on the company size and where it is located and the specific department, right? And so that means, statistically speaking, out of that 200 people from that 5,000, that's what, less than 10%, is it? If my math is not wrong. Less than 10%, right? And so now the question beholds, what makes you stand out of the 5 to 7,000 people? What makes you different, right? And bear in mind that nowadays almost every student has a degree. On paper, every student is very similar, right? I mean, like coming from a really well university and studying perhaps the same educational curriculum. On paper, most students competing for an internship are literally the same, right? And so the question beholds, like, what makes you different? What makes myself different? And most importantly, how do I even get in? All right, so let's talk about this, right? The first thing that I did, right, to land an internship back then, this was around 2 years ago for a Singaporean company. The thing I did was I reverse engineered the full-time positions of that particular company, right? As an example, let's say that you are applying as an internship for marketing, okay? And in whatever company, it doesn't really matter. And so what I did was I literally, within the same company, right, on LinkedIn or JobStreet, wherever you're applying, they also have job vacancies, or they publish job roles that are for the full-time roles, right, for the same department, right? So for a marketing student, I was looking at the company's job listings for a full-time marketing position. And then so when you like search for that specific job, there's a description, right, a job description, and then they explain like everything that they're looking for. So I looked at exactly that, and I figured out for a full position, all of the requirements they were looking for. And then within the requirements, very often they're very specific. Like they would say, for example, these GPA they're looking for, your scores, professional certificates, or curriculum. So a lot of these stuff, they mention it specifically in the job description. And so what I did was, the first thing, I reverse engineered that, and I figure out, you know, like, I know I'm not applying for a full-time role, but I thought, and it worked, and it's, why not, right? Like, do it. I figure out, okay, those are the things required for full-time role, so I might as well do the same stuff to get into an internship. So that was the first thing that I did, right? And the second thing is, and that's probably what everyone, you know, talks and preaches about, I mean, fair enough, is about your resume and your cover letter, because this is really, really important, right? Your resume is literally like your, you know, your CV. It's literally the impression you give on a company. It's your ticket, right? In other words. And so if your resume is not optimized for whatever reason, I can promise and guarantee you that no matter how good and qualified and skillful you are not going to get the job. Or in other words, the internship. Absolutely impossible. And that is because you have to understand that in 2026, right, or in the modern era, there's something known as an ATS, right? An ATS, right, coming from a cybersecurity student, an ATS is nothing more than an algorithm. Something like just imagine like a robot going over like really quickly, right? Lines of code, just arbitrary code, just executing. And what the ATS does is it looks for keywords, specifically in your resume. And then once it finds, you know, the keywords that it's looking for, it gives you a specific score. And eventually that score accumulates and it becomes your ATS score. And when your ATS score does not reach a minimum, let's say like 75 out of 100 points, then your resume will never even be looked at by a human. And I'll repeat that, because if your resume does not go through the ATS system, and I can promise you, almost every single company, especially the big companies, they use an ATS. If your resume doesn't go through the ATS, a human will never even see you, never even heard about you. No matter how good and qualified you are, if you don't pass this ATS, you're just not going to get through. Simple, straightforward. Optimize your resume. If you want to learn how, we do it for free in our online community. You can check it out. But for now, just remember that optimizing your resume is very important. Okay? The third one, qualify specifically. Now, I did this mistake that because, you know, perhaps you're desperate, and I get it as a student, right? There's only a very short window for you to apply, right, for an internship, and I get it. Maybe it happens last minute, or like, I don't know, your first company messed up and now you have to suddenly find another company. Like, for whatever reason, you have to find an internship, right, quickly. And then what you do is you start like bulk applying. Like, you apply for any type of internship, and by any I don't mean like within the same company. I mean like random ass positions and random ass jobs. And that's what you don't want to do. Because, for example, in my case, right, as a cybersecurity student, suddenly being desperate, I wanted to apply for, I don't know, AML or KYC or marketing or operations management. Like, you get the point. Like, at one point when you start like panicking and freaking out, you do all sorts of weird stuff. And then in terms of internship, you start applying for internships that doesn't even like suit your roles and qualification. Because the thing is, I'm not saying you won't get it. In fact, I'm saying exactly that. You won't get it 100%, because the recruiters are very specific in what they want. So don't waste your time on bulk applying for internships and for roles that just don't suit your qualification. You can just forget about that. And no matter how desperate you are. Okay? So remember number 3. The fourth, and this is really important, especially for the ones living in Asia, this is something that is highly regarded, and that's your reference. Now, reference is really important. When a lot of students, right, that we coach and consult, when they were applying for the Big Fours, I realized, I'm just thinking for this recording, I realized a lot of them, and I'll tell you in just a moment how that happens, a lot of them were able to get the internships because of reference. And so why that's the case is because if somebody within the company refers you, right? If somebody like, I don't know, somebody you're really impressed, or it might even be a family member or whatsoever, if somebody recommends you, and sometimes within the job application itself, like for example, if you apply for PwC or for Big Four, there's a specific section that talks about reference emails or reference ID, and then you put in their employee ID. So when you put in a reference, the ATS system that we talked about earlier, the ATS, so according to the ATS system, imagine there are like levels, like layers, right? And so the first layer of ATS is where it literally goes through the keywords, right, on your resume. If you use a reference, you will skip the first layer of ATS and it'll go straight to a human. Imagine this is a recruiter. Rather looks like a monkey. Yeah, so just imagine this is the recruiter. And so if you use a reference, your resume will go straight to the recruiter. Now, I'm not saying you will get the job. It is more likely, right? Because you passed probably the hardest thing, and ATS is the hardest thing. And it's understandable why they use ATS, because if you think about, as I mentioned earlier, the amount of people that apply for a singular job, a singular internship, is so high. Like, no wonder they're using ATS, right? Especially like the amount of like false positives, or the amount of like random, like no offense, like random people applying. Like, it makes sense why they would use an algorithm to flag those stuff early, right? And so what happens next is, when you get into the internship, it'll either be obviously a very short window, depending either 6 to 9 weeks. There are some internships that stretch to 6 months, right? Like, again, it really depends on the company. But what you're going to do, surprisingly, in the internship is mundane tasks. You will do very simple and repetitive tasks, and tasks that will test your character. And by tasks, right, I've been talking and discussing this with my business partner. Tasks even like, giving, making coffee for people, and I don't know, like tidying someone's desk, or like filling up a Microsoft Excel sheet that's pointless. Like, that's the type of task that you will actually do. And so then you question a lot, like, what's the point? Like, what's the point of doing these stuff? Like, like, why am I even doing this? It doesn't even help the company. Like, it won't even contribute to the department whatsoever. The reason why you're doing these tasks is because they want to value your character. And I can guarantee you for sure, 100%, that your character is the most important thing that you're going to have when you be working. Because yes, you can complete a task completely quickly. You can be very skillful and competent, and you can do all the work that they give you. But if your character sucks, I'm sorry, buddy, you're not going to make it. No matter how nice your internship was, and no matter how many things you accomplished and did what they wanted, if they don't like your character, right, the way your personality, or I mean, personality is a little bit different, but your attitude and your morals and the way you communicate, if you don't nail this part during the internship, this will never happen. Never. This will never ever happen. So realize this, that when you go into the internship, your character is tested. So at the start, you might be like this guy, right? You're so excited. You got the internship, you're a student, right? You're getting work experience. You might even get money, right? So you're happy. You start off happy. After 6-9 weeks, let's say 3 months, this is who you become. And this is the person that questions everything. They're going to test your patience. Are you going to be pissed? Are you going to be moody? Will you even be able to complete your job? After the 6 to 9 weeks, they're going to look at your character and be like, hey, listen, he did it. He managed to, under pressure, complete all his tasks. He was effective, collaborative. His communication was well. He was patient. We gave him random stuff. He did it without saying or complaining too much. And so if that is you, right? After the 6-9 weeks, congratulations, you got the full-time job, and they will definitely offer you that, because mistakes is part of this. And in internship, right, I did probably 1 or 2 internships so far in my life. In the internship, they expect you to do mistakes. But one thing you shouldn't do, right, realize that if the employer expects you to do mistakes, one thing you shouldn't do is just keep quiet. You need to speak up, man. You need to ask questions, and you need to not be naive or egotistical in the sense that you think you can complete everything, because the truth is you can't. And I've experienced that firsthand. So you need to ask questions. You need to ask your supervisor. You need to ask for help. And I get it, you might be an introvert or shy person, but keeping quiet reflects back to your character, one. And number two, like you're gonna eventually reach or do mistakes that the employer doesn't want, right? But that's not something you want. And so don't keep quiet. Ask questions and be curious, and ask for a helping hand whenever you need. So if you enjoyed this video, subscribe. If not, I guess not. Just subscribe. Bye bye.